Thanks, Teresa.
You're welcome. You're all set.
Don, whenever you're ready.
Okay, welcome everybody for our second day of budget considerations. Just want to remind everybody, this isn't a decision brief. We're not expecting a vote on anything here. This is informational. We're going to throw a little curveball today. We're going to have a PowerPoint presentation today regarding the full hiring of an in-house full-time attorney. But first, before we get after that, I'd like to start with courts, and that would be on page 10. And Judge Fall, there you go. You mind starting off on page 10? Same old, except we're on Zoom, as we've been doing in the past.
Hey, well, welcome everybody. I am Bronson Fall. I'm the judge for the city of Selah. Page 10 is revenues, and as you can imagine, probably what you're seeing in other areas as well as COVID is our revenues. Our revenues all come from generally the police and what they're doing. So if they're out citing more people and if more people are committing crimes and getting caught, then typically our revenues will go up. With this last year, with COVID issues going on, we have seen less cases come through, so you can see our revenues are down. Does anybody have any particular questions about the revenues?
I see no hands. Why don't we go to expenditures, Your Honor?
Okay. So our expenditures, unlike COVID-related revenues, are pretty static year after year. Generally, the only things we see changing in our expenditures are the annual increases in salary and benefits that are set by the city. One area that I did decrease expenditures in was professional services. We had set that pretty high, and that is my budget that I use for a whole bunch of things. The one area that in professional services that we never know what happens is if we have to use special interpreters for particular cases. So every year we have Chinese or Vietnamese, it seems like one a year, interpreters that we have to pay, and those are not generally very cheap. Thankfully, they've been on infractions so far. They haven't been in a criminal case, so it hasn't been recurring issues. We could see that number if we happen to have somebody that needs a specialized interpreter that ends up wanting a jury trial. That number could eat up all of the professional services budget. And that's typically why you will see it set high in anticipation of those kinds of things, but we usually don't need to use it, so we come in under it.
Any question on judicial expenditures on the court? Yeah, Russ.
And maybe this is a question for Don. I just see telephone and seminars, dues and subscriptions. Is this an overhead scenario, or are these directly attributed to the courts?
I heard telephone, and was the other question about postage?
I'm sorry. Cellular, telephone, training and seminars, and dues and subscriptions. Are they directly related to court, or are they overhead?
So the cellular telephone comes from Officer Knox. I pay part of his salary, and he has a cellular telephone that I pick up part of. The training and the dues are the requirements that I have for being a judge. So I have to pay annual dues to the District Court Municipal Judges Association. There's an annual conference. This year it was done virtual that I usually attend. And so those are fees associated with requirements like continuing legal education for attorneys.
Okay, thanks.
Any other questions on court? Yeah, it's Roger.
Yes, I had a question on the regular pay from the actual from 2019 went up to 94, but the benefits went down a few dollars. And how do you explain that difference? Is that personnel difference that make a different benefit to them, longevity or something?
So we've had, if you factor in the 2% raise, plus the additional $300 a month for Anita, and on the benefits, Dale, can you explain that? I'm not sure how that worked out.
Well, it sounds like Roger's questions regarding the almost $38,000 in 2019. And offhand, I'm not remembering, offhand, I can't explain the exact reason. I believe that was the year that Anita came on, and I know we were hiring out. I don't recall if there was like overlap training or something like that. But offhand, I'm unable to explain. Other than that was, I believe, the first year when Anita started, and there may have been something with the staffing level.
Okay.
The difference in numbers from 18 to 19 was because Anita had a different healthcare plan than Vanessa had used. And there was an increase because I think she had put her whole family on it.
Okay. Yeah,
And-
good point.
And that appears from 19 to 20, and then to 21, there is a little bit of difference, but it all appears to be about the same.
Okay. Then more for Dale, I guess, than anything. I just noticed that the percentage of benefits for most departments is somewhere around 50%, and of the salaries and wages, but yet here it's not that high. What's the difference?
Well, I'm looking over at page 13, Roger, which is executive, and it's about 1/3 the personnel benefits. So yeah, that would surprise me. Now I'm looking further. In the finance department, it's 35 against 86,000. So, it's still under half, but so yeah, I don't think that 37 is particularly low. I mean, we could look back on the detail of the on page 102, where it shows those fringe benefit costs.
I
And
was
so-
just having trouble with one I saw was as high as 62 when I went through this, and so I was just curious is all.
Yeah, no, those are good questions. So yeah, I guess whichever one was 62, that's interesting. And yeah, I'd be willing to take a look at that. But as long as my detail sheets in the 100s there that calculate those fringe benefit costs, as long as there's not any formula errors or anything there, I mean, yeah, that's the way it is. So offhand, you wouldn't remember who that 62% was, would you?
Okay. I will look it up later and let you know, Dale.
Okay, I appreciate it.
I'm looking at the spread here for benefits in courts, and the only people that draw benefits in courts is Anita Garcia and Mr. Knox. So maybe that has an effect on that.
Well, true that, Bronson's 12-month salary is $26,000, and we do not pay any medical insurance on him. And, the medical insurance is a very large part of fringe benefit costs. So yeah, I think you found your answer right there.
Okay, thank you.
Bronson's
now-
too healthy to need medical insurance.
City of Yakima provides me some decent medical insurance.
Okay, before we move on, Judge Fall, there were some questions about our electronic monitoring system yesterday, and I think there was some questions that we had. One was, could we take more advantage of that system? And could you kind of give us a thumbnail sketch of how you assign this and how you see it falling out for 2021?
Sure. And to no surprise, Don and I have talked about this on occasion every so often. Electronic home monitoring is a program with the police department. How court works is I generally, like most judges, will follow a recommendation if there's a plea of guilt in a plea negotiation. So the prosecutor and the defense attorney have way more knowledge about any particular case than I am presented with. They will work out a resolution in, almost 100% of the cases. When they present that to me, I am generally following that recommendation. There have been occasions where I don't follow the recommendation because of somebody's criminal history, a lot of it, or a lack of it for a particularly high recommendation. If there's a case that I generally am not unsure about following the recommendation, I will ask for an explanation. But I generally am not going to overrule a joint recommendation by the parties to impose something that they're not asking for. That's when you do that, it kind of messes up the whole system. Again, I'm not the one with all of the knowledge of the facts, or if there are legal issues or even witness issues in a case. So that usually starts with having a conversation with the prosecutor if the city wants to ask for more cases to be put on electronic home monitoring. That would become part of a recommendation for electronic home monitoring. I am not opposed to imposing more electronic home monitoring. I typically do not like imposing it on domestic violence type of cases. I have imposed it. I don't like it. I don't think it's appropriate to put potential abusers back in the home with victims with an ankle bracelet on. I don't think that's an appropriate kind of sentence. Most all other kinds of sentences, I don't really have any personal or professional objections to imposing electronic home monitoring. I think it can be a good tool. We do have the use of electronic home monitoring with an alcohol sensor. It does cost a little bit more for the person who's sentenced to it, but it should detect whether or not they're using alcohol in a case that may or may not have involved alcohol, or at least there's an allegation of alcohol.
Thanks, Judge Fall. Could you tell us from, I'm sorry, Russ, go ahead.
Thanks, Judge Fall. And also, one other question I had was about yesterday. Our police department talked about the limits in the jails and in the incarcerations. Are we able to, because there's no room to put the people who get arrested, is there a way to financially provide them a ticket and give them maybe a lower requirement to avoid that? What's not being an attorney here, I'm not sure the process, or even if that's legitimate.
You mean as an alternative to jail?
Yes.
So courts in Washington, the appellate courts in Washington have really restricted the ability to issue fines in cases like what we deal with in Selah. Essentially, if you find somebody is indigent, you can't even issue them fines anymore. There are some mandatory fees that you can issue, but those are not the kind of fees that are helping with budgets and whatnot. We have converted and it's not that room for people to be in jail right now. It's that jails are just refusing to accept people because of COVID issues. We have converted some of that to electronic home monitoring. I think we have one set either this next week or the week after, depending on when we get back into court, where there's a request. Somebody was supposed to do some days following their electronic home monitoring, and there's a request to transfer that all back to electronic home monitoring because there's no ability for them to go into jail. So we can do that on some cases, and we have done that on some cases. But transferring it to more of a fine is not really an option because of some of the court cases we've had in the last several years.
Thanks.
Thanks, Judge Fall. And maybe could you give us a hint as to where things are going with the jails, when we will be maybe getting a chance to incarcerate more people, especially the misdemeanor defendants? Do you know where that's going?
Officer Knox checks in every so often. We use Sunnyside City Jail for a lot of our post-sentence jail time. They have changed the date that they have been telling us they're going to open back up. So I think right now it's into January. If that stays, I would be shocked. I would be surprised if they didn't extend that again. The county jail, we have several people that are being held at the county jail, but that's not just on our charges. Generally, they're on felony charges as well, or other cases, because the county is not booking people for our stuff unless it's a mandatory booking, like domestic violence and certain number of DUI offenses.
Thanks, Judge Fall. Do we have any more questions for the judge? Thank you. Appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Okay, now we'll move on to legal, and that's on page 17. I'm sorry, page 16. Before I get into revenues on legal, I'd like to present a brief on our city attorney, a full-time in-house city attorney. So, Teresa, could you bring that up for everybody, please?
Yes, sir. 1 second, please. You should be able to see it now.
Okay, what I'd like to do, ladies and gentlemen, is give the brief. Let me get through the brief, and then we'll deal with the questions after the brief. Okay. What we have here is a proposal for a full-time city attorney, or it's also called an in-house city attorney for the city of Selah. Next slide, please. Okay, we're looking at our history and functions here. Until April of 2006, the city of Selah maintained a full-time city attorney on the payroll as far back as 1996. At that time, Judge, who is currently a Yakima County District Judge, he served as our full-time city attorney from 1996 until June of 2003. I believe there was a year break in there where he went into private service or practice with his father, but he came back. Bob No then took the position from July 2003 until April of 2006. He, in April, was engaged by Union Gap as their full-time attorney. They gave him a better offer and he left. And the city of Selah hired another attorney. He lasted about 4 months. There were some issues, conduct issues with him, and he had to be let go. And at the time, Bob Jones recontacted Mr. No and was trying to find a way to get him to come back. And at this point, Mr. No made a proposition to the city of Union Gap and to the city of Selah that he could provide services as a contractor for both cities. And he set himself up as a contract attorney for several cities over time. And as you all, most of you should know, he served with us until August of 2019. And some of you here may remember in August of 2000, or actually September of 2019, the city, the executive approached the council with a request to hire a full-time attorney. And we wanted to retain Mr. No as a full-time attorney because he had an offer from the Yakima School District to be their in-house attorney. The council turned us down, and we went to another contract attorney, at which point we hired Mr. Case in September 2019, and of course he's currently in the position. Just some background on that history. I recontacted Judge Kevin Roy just this week, and I asked him his perspective on this situation from where he sits now and going back in time to where he was as our sitting city attorney. And he wholeheartely agrees that we should have an in-house attorney. And of course, I spoke to Mr. Robert No. He believed last year we should have had a full-time attorney, and he still thinks that. And I have also, in my discussions with our current contract attorney, Mr. Case, and once again, we got 3 attorneys, 2 previous full-time attorneys that actually work for the city that all say we need an in-house city attorney, someone who can handle our civil issues. And I'll get more into that later. The city attorney position is created through our municipal code 1.10.0012, and the duties of that position are provided in the RCW, Art 35.23.111. And what I've done in the next 3 bullets is essentially lift those right out of the municipal code and the RCW. So what you see in front of you is what the municipal code describes as the conditions under which they would be hired, and under the RCW, the statute that lays down the formal duties of the city attorney. But I would like to point out that in that last paragraph, that the city attorney position shall be filled by appointment of the mayor, subject to a confirmation by the council. And the terms of employment can be terminated by the mayor, but also by the council. And if you juxtapose that against, say, for instance, the city administrator, the mayor can terminate the city attorney or the city administrator with or without cause, and not seek the permission or guidance from the council. In this case, I believe this was set up in order to make sure that we have an attorney that can faithfully represent the corporation, the city, in case there's malpractice or misadventures being done by the mayor or the city administrator. So the mayor may want to fire this, say, a council or in-house counsel, but the council itself, the city council, may resist that, and they can thwart a firing. So there's another layer of protection for the city to ensure that the executive doesn't get out of shape or do something that is illegal, and the council and the attorney agree, but the mayor may not agree. So there is another level of protection here. Next slide. Okay, the HR manager functions and historic background. We, as you all know, we had what I want to call an informal HR manager, and he left us recently to go on to bigger and better things. But here's some of the duties here. Reports to the city administrator. It supports a workforce of approximately 58 full-time personnel. If we do hire a city attorney, it'll be 59 full-time personnel. That individual advises the city administrator on HR policies, procedures, and employment issues. Assures the consistent application of pertinent federal, state, and city rules, regulation, policies, and procedures. Also a coordinator of significant programs. But a little history on this. This position was created informally by me during calendar year 2015. I was hired in May of 2015. And upon my arrival, Andrew Potter, very motivated individual, he was assigned as an assistant to the city administrator, essentially what Monica is to the mayor. And the way it was briefed to me when I arrived was, hey, you may or may not want him on board. If you need to lay him off, fine, lay him off. So what I did as I evaluated what we could use him for in a more useful manner, and after a short period of observation, I shifted his duties to focus on HR issues. Now, he didn't do that exclusively. He also did grant research. He took over some of the information systems support functions. He backed up Monica on executive assistant duties. He could act as a recorder or a executive assistant during meetings, and he provided occasional interpreter support for us. So he was kind of a jackknife, for us in the city, and he did a great job. Currently, our HR tasks, where they're at right now, have been redistributed to myself, majority of it, to the clerk treasurer, the department heads is a very small amount, and to the executive assistant. And these, there's some small functions that she's going to have to pick up that Andrew was doing, and mostly including just putting out ads for job openings and positions, either to the Yakima Herald or other outlets that we usually use. Next slide. Why have an in-house attorney? What's the main reason here, above and beyond having a contract attorney? A contract attorney, of course, is necessary in the city of Selah, with a budget around $15 million, 10,000, at least I believe we're at 10,000 people right now in the city. An in-house attorney, we believe, would immediately elevate the level of legal support, resulting in better quality of work, more focused efforts, and relevant work product. How would this happen? Why would it matriculate to better support? Well, an in-house attorney would be able to more proactively identify risk areas and provide administrative and legal strategies that would result in significant efficiencies. An in-house attorney's physical presence and exclusive focus on city issues make him or her a more integrated member of the staff. Increasing the accessibility of the attorney will allow staff and attorney more opportunity to communicate. Greater familiarity between staff and attorney gives the attorney a deeper understanding of issues, thus making the attorney-client relationship exponentially more effective. I could give a number of examples of how this would actually work. We went through our current CARES grant application process, and the city, we don't have the ability to reach out and touch the attorney for every document, and if we did, he would require a much steeper price, and because he wouldn't be able to do work for his clients, other clients besides the city. So when we did the CARES grant application, it probably should have had a long look from the city attorney to sharpen the wording on that and make it more legally unassailable. Well, we sent it out, and in retrospect, we should have had an attorney's eyes on that. Had we had an in-house attorney who was physically there, and he would have this running across his desk, or even in maybe even informal conversation, catch wind of it, and he could have gotten ahead of some of our difficulties there. These weren't major difficulties, but they were there, and that's just a small example of how that communication and deeper understanding of what we're doing would make us a better machine with regard to our better team in providing support to the city. As a result of full-time presence, a better understanding of city requirements would make the in-house city attorney more effective in managing outside counsel, as well as prosecution and defense attorneys who work for the city. Now, we will always, even if we have an in-house attorney, we will always have a need for coverage counsel issues, as well as we've got a prosecutor, we've got a defender, and we have day-to-day court issues. Those things would fall under the city attorney's supervision, and he could monitor those better. I know there have been several times where I've had to engage with mostly with the defense attorney to get their performance more up to our expectations. But this would shift from the city administrator to now a sitting city attorney rather than a contract attorney. Efficiency increases with continuity of knowledge and effort. The full-time attorney would have situational awareness of staff issues, and day-to-day interactions will result in less errors. Going back to what I was saying earlier, higher quality staff products too. Full-time attorney will be able to conduct a more proactive approach to the review of potential legal issues, as well as provide more timely counsel to the mayor, council, and staff. Timeliness, time is everything. A good plan executed late is not nearly as good as a poor plan executed quickly. So in having an in-house attorney, we would have both rapid understanding of legal issues and a quicker regurgitation or analysis from our city attorney. There would be a reduction of claims in key areas. We would expect a reduction of claims in employee claims, labor law, land use, OPMA, and public records. I laid those out specifically because those are the ones where we can get sideways most easily. And they can also cost a city a lot of money if we fail to deal with them appropriately. And having an in-house attorney would indemnify us. We'd be like a better, more solid insurance policy to keep these kinds of things from landing on us. A systemic and thorough review of the Selah Municipal Code, as you all know, needs to be done, and it's very difficult for a contract attorney to be able to do that in a systemic way. Right now, we're dealing with issues as they come up and promising to get after them. For instance, our sign ordinances that need revision, they'll get done, but there are others as well with code enforcement. Like we're running into code enforcement issues where we really are having more difficulty enforcing a particular code because the code is not written or up to date as it should be. So having an in-house attorney could correct some of those problems. And finally, and not insignificantly, additional costs incurred by occasional litigation that the city is currently required to pay our contracted attorney will no longer be required. This can amount to tens of thousands of dollars, as you'll see in a moment. Next slide. Why merge the city attorney and HR? Currently, HR position does not support a full-time employee. We're finding that out, and while we're not 100% comfortable, this is a workload that I haven't been dealing with for 5 years, so almost 6 years. But it's certainly something we can adapt to easily if need be. A qualified attorney is experienced in investigations, period. Also in conflict resolution and mediation. So what we would be getting is somebody who would be a natural fit in those 3 areas. The attorney would be expected to be an expert in labor law and wrongful termination mitigation. So those are, labor law, termination mistakes, or analysis of employee issues. An attorney should bring a special set of skills and understanding that somebody that we pay $56,000 a year would not have. The attorney would bring expertise in negotiations for labor contracts as well as medical coverage contracts. So the attorney already is involved with those when we sit down with the Teamsters or when we go through our medical coverage contracts, which I did this year. I reviewed the medical contracts that we had or that we have with Teamsters. I juxtaposed that against some competitive providers, and we just didn't move on because the current Plan Z worked. But this is something that the HR manager, the attorney would look at before it came to the city administrator or the mayor. The attorney would provide superior expertise to such issues as medical leave, labor and industry regulations law, and the Americans with Disabilities Act and civil service regulations. Those are a natural fit. A good labor law attorney knows these things, Pat, and they should know them anyway. And then finally, I've heard a few folks concerned about a legal conflict of interest when combining both positions. There's a misnomer out there, a misunderstanding. The HR manager is not a father confessor. There's no confidentiality when a person comes to an HR manager. The only kinds of things that would have to be kept confidential would be things like HIPAA issues, medical issues that shouldn't be shared, and nobody knows those better than an attorney. So naturally, those would have to remain confidential. But if there's some other issue, that whether it's an attorney HR or a straight up HR, that individual reports directly to me. What goes into that office comes to my office. There's no firewall, so to speak, and I believe that's a misunderstanding. But when we look at the legal understanding of what is a conflict of interest, the answer is no. An attorney cannot serve 2 clients with differing desires. The only client the city attorney HR manager will have is the city of Selah. The employee with maybe a complaint or an issue is not the client. That is an employee. And when that employee goes to the HR director, who also happens to be the city attorney, whatever is said to that HR director is being told to the executive of the city. There's not really any firewall there. And let me lay out a scenario here. In the event an employee has a claim ranging from wrongful termination, sexual harassment, hostile work environment, etc. One thing a lot of people need to understand, everybody needs to understand, that type of a complaint, if it turns into a litigation, would go to some other attorney, a coverage attorney, not the city attorney. It would not represent the city in litigation in this situation. Coverage counsel would handle HR claims in court. The city attorney, HR manager, could be a potential witness or a staff member directly involved with accounting for the city's action in a given case. And the way we see this is its clear advantage in having an attorney who has extensive knowledge with regard to labor law and associated federal and state regulations and statutes. In essence, they become an expert witness because they know how courts work. They know how to sit through a deposition and answer deposition questions in a clear, concise, and advantageous way for the city. So we see this as an advantage. It's not a conflict. Next slide, please. This is just a flow chart that kind of simplifies it. But when we're looking at a potential flow chart for a potential dispute, they come in all sizes and shapes. But this is, let's say we have an employee complaint. That individual goes to the HR manager, who also happens to be the attorney, and there's an investigation. Comes up with findings. HR director comes up with findings, and then there's a recommendation to the city administrator and the mayor. And then after that recommendation, the city administrator and the mayor make a decision. At that point, the attorney, HR director, articulates that decision for the mayor. And now the next step, depending on what happens, let's say it's the worst case scenario, there's litigation, that will be handled by coverage counsel. We would never hand that to a city attorney, whether it's contract or in-house. Now, what could happen eventually is the attorney HR, he or she's going to monitor that case for us and report on that litigation, and also may become an expert witness for the city. So that's the way we see this scenario. It's kind of a worst case scenario, but we need to look at that as how this would work out in this city attorney HR manager relationship. Next slide. Okay, here's the nut. City attorney HR manager labor costs. In front of you, we got calendar year 2020 labor costs. Our city attorney is currently at $120 a year, $10,000 a month. But we also have some litigation costs. The Owens appeal right now, his particular law office has billed us for $20,353 year to date. And if we look at our HR manager position, we're looking at $56,112 a year for a total of almost $200,000. Our proposed calendar 2021 labor costs when we merge these two positions is $160,000 a year. Now, there will be some associated costs, professional association costs, some Westlaw subscriptions, which would bring us up. We'd have to pay another $6,000 a cell phone, but the HR manager already had a cell phone, so some of it's just a wash. But ultimately, what we're looking at is some significant savings. And we got to understand what we're getting here. We're getting something we've been asking for 2 years in a row, something the city has had pretty much consistently over our last 4 city attorneys. Actually, it should be 5. 3 of those 5 were full-time attorneys. So this is not an unusual or out of shape requirement that is something from out of the blue. We've been asking for it. We're asking for it again. We know what our challenges are on the staff. The mayor understands this. We're here day to day fighting the fight. And we're telling you once again, we need a city attorney. The last time the council turned us down on this, they said, hey, it was too much. They focused on the cost, not the skill set, not the main objection was the cost. Well, we found a way to make this pencil out. Next slide. So the way we're presenting this is we've got 2 options here. Course of action 1, which is what we're asking the council to do when we meet for our budget vote, and that is accept the budget change, hire an in-house attorney. The only other course of action here is don't accept the change, and we will continue with the contracted attorney. We will not hire an HR director. That's just not going to happen. Now I'm open for questions. Teresa, if you could drop the slide. Thank you. Yeah, Jackie.
Thank you. Suzanne's not available to ask some questions. She is listening as well as she can. So this question is coming from her. 2 questions. The first one, are there any other cities of our size that combine these roles?
Right now, we have one, not our size, Kennewick. Let me see, I think I got it written down here. There we go. It's not. Yeah, Kennewick combines their assistant city attorney with the HR position. They're not our size though. But I guess they're, of course, significantly bigger than us. But our size actually, smaller size actually does argue for combining that position with HR. If we were a city the size of Kennewick, I was surprised to see that they did that because they have a much more healthy budget than we've got. But the size, the 58 personnel, the $15 million budget really does speak to the need to combine the city attorney position with another role so we get better efficiencies. And that's the way we're approaching it.
Okay, my second question is, I think you kind of answered it, that you said if we do not approve in the budget for a full-time attorney and stay with the contracted services, that we would not have an HR person. Would the city be considering a part-time person or a consultant for HR?
No.
And can you let me know, Don, why we would not consider those 2 options?
Right now, we believe we can handle this without the need to hire an additional employee by distributing the functions out to the 4 or 5 other actors in the city. Most of it comes to my desk. I would say 80% of the work comes to my desk, and I have no problems stretching to do that. It's not an unreasonable requirement.
Thank you.
Yeah, okay.
Sorry, I asked Suzanne's question, but I forgot to ask mine. So I have 2 questions. The first one is, do you know how many other cities our size that have a full-time attorney?
Not right off the top of my head. I haven't done a thorough study. I have a list. Now, my access to these lists is very dependent on who participates in the survey with AWC. But I have a document that we ran out of AWC, and it's got a whole list of cities that have city attorneys. And I'll be providing that to the council along with those org charts and so on and so forth, so you can review that and judge for yourself whether this is equitable or not. Now, we know we've got the hours of work needed to hire a full-time city attorney. We're confident that the need is there. And let me point out that this is coming in a very consistent manner. You're going to you heard from us last year. You're hearing from us again. You got 3 attorneys who've all been exposed to the work here in Selah, and they're all saying you need an in-house attorney to be more effective, to do what needs to be done. And what I'm saying to the council is listen to the professional advice you're getting. You got a city administrator sitting here before you telling you it's a necessary thing. You got a mayor who strongly concurs with that. And I'm gonna turn it over to Rob here in a minute, let him articulate his thoughts on this. But to say, hey, what about Union Gap? Do they have one? Or what about maybe Zillah or Sunnyside? Well, Sunnyside does have one. So does Ellensburg. They're a little bigger than us. In fact, I believe Ellensburg has 2 attorneys. So our workload supports the requirement. What other cities have, it should be less important than what is the requirement we've got that we're articulating to you here. And I think that's the question that needs to be brought to me, your administrator. I think I've articulated the requirement, and I'm going to let Rob talk to it in a minute. But I've also heard from 2 previous sitting attorneys, and they're telling me you need a full-time attorney. So this is where we're coming from on this. We're not going out and saying, hey, look, Toppenish has a city attorney or doesn't have a city attorney or should, but we're not sitting in Toppenish's shoes. We're not sitting in Zilla's shoes. We know what we've got here, and what we're telling you is we need an attorney in-house.
Understood. I think it does help us all, though, to have a little more information just
Sure.
for our comparison.
I'll provide that for you.
Okay, so my last question in regards to this attorney is, would the attorney, if we hired a full-time attorney, have the ability to have other clients, or is this attorney only going to be representing the city of Selah?
The attorney that we hire will have to be working exclusively for the city of Selah. Now, if this attorney comes to us from private practice and has a legacy load, we would make an accommodation with the time limit on it for that load to be offloaded off of them. So we want to make sure that we've got a full spread of available talented attorneys that can do this job. So what we would do is in the contract, the plan would be for that attorney to give us a plan on how he or she would offload their clients in order to matriculate to full-time support for the city. Kevin.
From your presentation, what I'm hearing is that we have the load, we have the need for a full-time attorney. I was for that the last time, and I still am for the full-time attorney. However, you also presented that we don't need a full-time HR director. And for that reason, I'm nervous about the 2 associated together. For that reason, I would be interested in a contract HR person on an as-need basis. So that's where I'm coming from. I think that would be meet both needs that you've expressed and avoid that type of confrontation that I see being the attorney force and the HR person.
Could I ask you what your objection or concerns about combining that position are? Maybe we can deal with that.
People that go to the HR director I know you said there's no firewall and but there's some expectations that this person is going to be on my side and not reflective of the city's side. They're HR, they're human resources. That's my concern, that people would be reluctant to see somebody who on one hand is fully representing the city and then is supposed to somehow turn around and represent their complaint.
Okay. Rob, Mike, I'll get to you. I'm going to ask Rob to address that a little bit, if you would mind.
Okay. Well, the way I would foresee it is, if this comes to pass and whoever gets the role is, again, the sole client, the sole employer, the sole, what the law calls master oftentimes, the sole master will be the city as a municipal entity. So your very last sentence, I'd actually disagree with Councilmember Wickenhagen about the idea of an aggrieved worker or a worker that just has whatever sort of issue, thinking or hoping or feeling that the HR person should be representing that worker on that worker's side, so to speak. That's just probably not true. There might be some hypothetical scenarios I could think of. I mean, if a worker comes in and says, look, I'm struggling at home. I've got, some personal issues, and please keep that under confidence. And can you help me? Do you know of any resources I can reach out to, like a crisis center or something like that? Well, in that scenario, I think colloquially, it's okay to say that the HR person or an HR / in-house lawyer person is kind of quote unquote on the side of the worker, because there's no adversarial context, meaning it's not a worker complaining about another worker or a worker complaining about what the employer, respondeat superior or master party has done wrong or right. By contrast, so I said, hypothetically, I could think of some of those scenarios, but by contrast, the bulk of scenarios would likely be that a worker presents either a formal grievance or they're sometimes just called a complaint if you're not in a union. But hey, I've been sexually harassed by so-and-so, or I didn't get my full wages or something of that nature. And in that scenario, the lawyer / HR person would be tasked with investigating just to find out what the truth of the matter is, not by contrast trying to advocate for the worker or even really trying to advocate for the city. Because if this does come to pass and this is a joint role, such that it's an attorney / HR person, the attorney is still going to be bound by the rules of professional conduct here in the state of Washington. Lawyers just can't get out of that, of course. Not that a lawyer should want to, but in that scenario, a lawyer has an obligation to be candid, be fair, be even-handed, and that includes that if a worker presents something in the investigation, it comes out that, hey, yeah, you were sexually harassed by a coworker, or you were sexually harassed by a superior, or maybe the government itself, the entity, didn't pay you the right wages. If the outcome of the investigation is such that wrong occurred, the lawyer / HR person should not be advocating for the worker because of that. It should just be advocating for truth and justice. So although I follow the stream of thought that some people are speculating that workers might be concerned about wanting to complain about something to an attorney, thinking the attorney is going to turn it on them or something. Those sort of speculations, I think, can be offered up or down on anything, unless and until it's tried. As Dawn's pointed out, some other cities have tried this and seem to be somewhat succeeding in it. I don't know that we have any indication that's going afoul in those scenarios. But finally, on the idea, and this maybe picks up both on your question, Councilmember Wickenhagen, and either Councilmember Mattson's question or her questions and Councilmember Vargas's questions, about the idea of, well, maybe we still kind of want some version of just an exclusive HR person or a consultant or a part-time person or something. What I can tell you again, that I would foresee that if this comes to pass and whoever might fill this role, joint role if it's created, again, that could happen, not that it needs to be contemplated and put in place up front, but could happen on a need basis, on a case-by-case basis. So for example, more hypotheticals, let's say it's the actual person that's filling this role that is the alleged wrongdoer. Well, of course, in that scenario, the person is not going to be tasked with investigating themselves. Or let's say it's a workplace type complaint that for one reason or another, the worker has a not just speculative concern, but a factual basis as a reason for not wanting to complain to whoever fills this role. Not necessarily that this person did the alleged wrong, but for whatever else. You can think of this sometimes. Sometimes people of a certain gender feel more comfortable talking about certain issues to people of their same gender, or at least having somebody of their same gender in the room. Whoever, if this role comes to pass, whoever's going to be tasked with filling this role, I would think the expectation and even the rules would be, again, comply with the rules of professional conduct, be candid, be fair, and on a case-by-case basis, if this person needs to step out or bring somebody else in, that could happen. But I don't think that there's a perceived likelihood that it's going to be consistently needing to be done or so frequently needing to be done that there is a need to actually still have an exclusive HR person or even a consultant kind of on retainer or as the regular go-to person rather than on a case-by-case basis. So I hope that kind of addresses some of the comments. Yes, we are talking about a potential future here. And I probably shouldn't have just used the word we. Pronoun we, when I say we're talking about it, is fine, but I want to be clear that when the administrators use that pronoun quite a bit, I believe he's talking about himself and the mayor as having this proposal idea. This is not my budget. This is not something I am pushing for, but I was asked to be here to try and answer some of these questions of how I would foresee it going as being a lawyer and also a lawyer that specializes in employment law. So if that touches on anything else, I'd be happy to address it.
Thanks, Rob.
Thank you.
All right, Mike?
Yeah, well, being a former public employee, I have the same feelings as Kevin. I think people or employees would be more likely to feel more comfortable going to an HR person instead of directly to an attorney. Not that, and I understand that all the information and all the findings are all going to be funneled in the same direction anyway. However, I think just the employees themselves would be more comfortable doing that and having it handled that way. And I know it wouldn't make any difference on where the information would be going and how it's going to be handled, but has anybody ever polled the city employees? I know if we have 58 of them, then it would be a simple poll just to ask, okay, how would you feel as far as having somebody represented in HR or going directly to the city attorney?
No, the answer to the question is we haven't polled the city employees about that. And just to remind you, this is, the HR position is only, and it really was created informally because we were so small. 58 souls on board didn't really, and if you look at one of the things that I went to was HR manager salaries. For a professional HR manager, really run closer to the hundreds of thousands, around $100,000 a year salary for us, a trained specialist to do this. Up until 5 years ago, the HR manager was the city administrator, and we have reverted back to that with the departure of Andrew, and so far it's working out fine. Not having major issues with that, but we believe that we're getting better efficiency, a more effective individual to handle it by combining it with the attorney. Certainly talking to the employees. I think if we were to do something like this and have an HR manager combined with the city attorney, we would have to get very proactive and have those meetings with individuals, have the city attorney, HR manager push himself or herself out into those departments and have firsthand conversations with everybody to get them comfortable with that. That would be on us to get the employees confident that whatever they need to say to an HR director, they can do that with a feeling of safety and confidence that what's going to be said that should be held confidential will be held confidential, and those things that they need to get done or adjusted will be dealt with in an honest and forthright manner. I think we can do that with the size of our organization.
Do you know if, I know that this is a number that you probably wouldn't have off the top of your head, but how many complaints come in on average on an annual basis, whether it be FMLA issues or
it's that is I may get maybe one every month and a half.
Okay.
If I could offer just a couple comments picking up on the question that was posed and some of what Dawn has said about it. I do agree that if this was to happen, consistent with what Dawn was saying, that there would need to be communication to the workforce as to what this means and what it doesn't mean, and some clarity there, and an effort to ask them to trust the process rather than prejudging it, okay? And secondarily and relatedly, part of that explanation would be to explain the way and the extent to which things have not changed. And by that, I mean this, that tough HR questions ultimately end up on the lawyer's desk anyway. No different than tough public records request questions end up on the lawyer's desk anyway. So the communication would hopefully educate the workforce to know that the lawyer's role is not going to be to just dismiss every complaint or try and cover things up, but rather, again, to seek truth and do an impartial investigation. And then that's the last part of my comments here. And this picks up on something that Dawn mentioned earlier in the slideshow presentation, because it's in the law, although some people probably are not immediately aware of it because it's not something that, you just think about late at night or something on your free time. And that is what I said earlier about, educating on the way things would not change. There's also an education on the way things would change. And that is this, as Don pointed out, right now, the contract attorney, and I'm talking about myself, of course, can be fired at the drop of a hat by the mayor. That's the way I wrote that contract on purpose. She can dislike my bald head and get rid of me. She can get rid of me because she disagrees with my legal advice or any reason. And it's solely her decision. By contrast, an in-house lawyer, the law says, is not subject to being fired at the whims of the mayor, and thus at the whims of the city administrator advising the mayor, but rather the council. The majority of the council also has to agree to get rid of or to replace the city attorney. So that's one thing that would change, not the law change, but if we have an in-house person, the workforce also would get educated on the fact that, what, this makes the lawyer more independent than the lawyer has been for the last handful of years, if we go back to kind of the old system with an in-house lawyer, such that if you think, boy, I don't want to complain about the hires up, because anytime you cast aspersions at the very top, you might get retaliated against, kind of that sort of mindset. That should actually be more alleviated if this idea comes to pass, because the lawyer will be freed up more so to do, again, what the lawyer believes needs to get done, even if mayor or administrator or other hires up might theoretically or actually disagree. So that would be one of the points of the outreach and the education too, to let the workers know that, what, your complaints will be handled in the same way, in the sense that there's going to be a fair and impartial investigation. But in addition, by having this joint role, the lawyer will be more free actually than through a contract scenario. And once that's really understood and the nuances of that are understood, I think it will help alleviate some of these concerns, which, again, I understand them. That's, of course, why we're having this discussion, but I do think they're more speculative in nature than fact-based at this point.
I know I'll give up the floor after this, but I'm not completely opposed to this for budget reasons, obviously. I mean, it makes sense. But I just want to make sure that I understand all the nuances with this. So you spoke, Mr. Wayman, about that there's definitely a need for a full-time attorney. So is there going to be enough time for HR issues to be addressed, and that the city employees will feel comfortable with the amount of time that they're given?
Yes, I do. I do believe that that the attorney will be able to handle both roles quite easily.
Okay, thank you.
Roger?
Yes, I have a couple of comments and a question. I worked for more than 30 years with an HR director reporting to me in the company, and I wasn't the owner in either case. So there was a misconception in general in society that HR represents the employee, and that's simply not the case. It's the case where employees have a channel to go through, and it makes no difference of whether it's a separate HR position or a combined position as far as that representation to they report to either the mayor or the city administrator in that. So it's still a process to go through, but that also works to the advantage of the employee because they have an avenue of appeal for someone above the HR director if they disagree with that, other than litigation. The second comment I have is I was concerned initially about this, and I reached out to
Roger, you hit your mute.
we'll go back. Yeah, I'm sorry. I was concerned about this, and I reached out to Bob No to ask him a couple of questions. And the first was, is this pretty unique, or is it pretty common that a city attorney would be fulfilling an HR role also? And he says that's relatively common. And I reached out to him because he's filled both positions as a contract attorney and as a city attorney. And he says there are many instances throughout the state where that's the practice is the attorney is the HR. And then to my question, I am wondering if we have to advertise this as a position because it's a new employee position at this stage. So will this be advertised, and will there be interviews for candidates to go through that process?
Well, there is not a requirement to advertise. The mayor and I intend, if the council approves this course of action, our intent is to offer the position to the current contract city attorney first. So we'll, as we do with other positions in the city, when we have an opening, if we've got a person who we believe on staff that can handle it, we would offer that job to the staff member. And so we're looking at Rob. We haven't asked him yet, and he hasn't determined. I mean, he's got partners he needs to talk with, and it may not work out. But our intent, if the council approves it, is to offer the job to Mr. Case first. He'll have the first right to refuse it. If not, then we will go out to bid, we will advertise. It's not a bid anymore. We will advertise for a full-time city attorney. We'll hit the Bar Association and others. We would probably do at least a region-wide search for a city attorney.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, Russ.
I wanted to take a look at that PowerPoint presentation on a couple of slides, if that's okay, to pull that back up and review them.
Would you like the whole thing, or do you want to just bring them up right now?
I'd like to bring them up right now. Just some questions about some information that was in there.
Sure. Teresa, you there?
One moment, please. Let me get that. Do you have a site in particular you want me to go to first?
Not off the, I didn't memorize them, so not off the top of my head.
Okay, hold on one second. Let me get it up.
So while she's doing that, one of my first concerns is similar to what Mike and Kevin have mentioned about having an independent person that they can speak, that employees can speak with, and that is a huge concern of mine. The problem when you have a city attorney and an HR position, one is going to suffer at the behest of the other, and so they're two very crucial positions that if the demand on the legal side becomes significant, then your HR issues are going to suffer, and vice versa. I do not believe we can afford to have either department suffer. And additionally, I didn't see anywhere in the presentation where the HR experience is going to improve by doing this. I saw where there's a demand, a proposed demand, or not proposed, but a noted demand for a full-time attorney, but I didn't see where it was indicated that the staff will receive a better HR experience, except for just what Mr. Case mentioned. So Teresa, can you start going through there? And I apologize, I'll stop you when I see the slide I wanted to touch on.
Okay. Yep. Just here we go.
Okay, keep going. Oh, actually, no, that one was one of them. We talked about the bottom bullet point, the removal of the attorney. It talks about needing a confirmation from the city council, and as well as removal from office by the mayor with the concurrence of city council, but by the majority. I don't see here where the city council themselves may, with a supermajority, not just a regular majority, but supermajority, may also remove this individual. And so
that's what it's just not there.
Yeah, that's a concern of mine. I would think that would be crucial. We talked about in scenarios where a mayor may be playing some games, may not have, and I'm not talking about Sherry, of course, but may be having some issues and wanting to remove this person. They may only do it at the confirmation of the council, but what if the council is concerned about the mayor themselves? How does the council resolve that issue?
Well, once again, I think you're barking it up against the strong mayor form of government here. I think this is written pretty close to the limit of the powers that can be encroached upon on the executive. With this particular relationship we're looking at here, there is a safeguard. If you're proposing some sort of a supermajority, I don't think that would, and I'd have to defer to the attorney on this, I don't think that would pass legal muster where a council could overrule a mayor on the hiring and firing of staff. Concurring with the mayor, yes, but not overruling a mayor.
If I understand right, a supermajority can overrule mayor, but maybe I don't.
Not on the hiring and firing of staff, Russ.
Okay. All right. My next thought, Teresa, if you wouldn't mind continuing. Keep going, please. Keep going, please. I think one more. There we go. So I realize this is one of many possible flowcharts, but we talked yesterday about an increase in department head pay because they are department heads, and I don't see anywhere in here where a department head is being consulted as the initial line of defense, initial line of discussion for an employee complaint. And so my concern here would be that should be part of that a department head would be part of that flow chart and not jumped over. But I also can see where if the complaint was about the department head, then they would need to be jumped over. So if the council decides to go with this, I think that's something that should be addressed. And then keep going.
What you're outlining here is a potentiality. I mean, this is
right. I'm just making a note for you. Mm-hmm.
We always, in all instances, if an employee at a particular department has an issue, we include the department head in those discussions. Sometimes the complaint goes straight to the department head and it gets referred to myself for investigation or discussion. But the department head is always consulted unless the employee can't talk to the department head because the complaint is about the department head.
Of course. Yep. And that I just don't see that in that flow chart. So that's why I made that note. Okay, continue on, Teresa, please. There we go. I think we're leaving out an important piece of information here. I see total base salary cost down at the bottom. And I think it's important to include when we're making a proposal like this, what the total dollar outlay would be, and we're not including their benefits. And so I'm curious if I saw the information right, the benefits would be approach around $51,000 a year. And given this proposal, it would actually cost more to have the full-time city attorney / HR manager than to have both the city attorney on contract and the HR manager. And so that's a concern to me, that we're not comparing apples to apples. We're leaving information out of there that's crucial. He did mention the $6,000 or something like that, but we're not looking at the full cost to the city on something like this. Finally, I think HR needs to be independent and neutral, and as Roger and Mike and Kevin have mentioned, this needs to be somebody who can receive those complaints and handle it in a way that the employee feels like there's a level of trust. And if they're going to an attorney, I don't care who it is, they're going to lose that trust, and they're not going to feel like they can make that complaint or make that report to that person. So I do not agree with this in the slightest. I feel like if we do a combination of attorney HR, likely Rob's knowledge and experience is heavily on the legal side, and so I feel like our HR side is going to suffer because the legal side will be addressed so heavily.
Okay, I didn't get a question out of any of that. I just got a lot of commentary. Did you have a question?
Nope.
Okay. Any other questions? Yes, Clifford?
Mine's not exactly, well, I guess I do have a couple of minor questions thrown in there. But to go along with what others have said previously, also have previously having been a public employee, that I think having the HR as being an independent entity, that I think deep down we realize that they're not there to help us as an employee. They're not on our side, but they are somebody that's independent. The perception is that I can go to somebody that's outside of this line of supervision that can help me make sure that I jump through all of the hoops in the right order and everything, and ultimately the path will be the same, but at least I know if I go to somebody that I perceive as being independent to help me make sure that I, as an aggrieved employee, can follow the correct procedure and not have my grievance thrown out because I didn't jump through the right hoops in the right order. And if, as a city employee, my choice is to go through the chain of command, which I may not trust, I'm not sure going to the city attorney is somebody that I would readily recognize as being independent and to help me go through the process. And so I just think the perception of that being a combined role it is something that we definitely have to look at. It seems over the recent months that that there is at least the possibility of employees that have complaints that have not brought them forward in the official manner because either they don't know the correct process, or which we've discussed and there isn't any reason why they wouldn't know, or that they don't trust the and so when I was on council before, it was when Kevin Roy was city attorney, and I agree that I don't even remember that far back that there wasn't enough work to keep a full-time city attorney busy, and so that isn't really my main concern. Part of it is it like Roger said, I know that it's not all of that unusual, but city attorney and HR manager just seems like an odd combination. Don, you had said that we don't have the support with 58 employees. I'm not sure what all HR responsibilities are. Obviously, with only 58 employees, they don't take a whole lot of time with the hiring and firing. How much of Andrew's time was spent specifically on HR responsibilities?
Well, we really didn't do a time study on Andrew. My perception is that I would say that a good 50% of his time was spent on HR issues and the other 50% on other things. I can only tell you what my experience is with it and how I am having to deal with it, and it is not. I'm just going to come clean with the whole council. There's not going to be an HR hired. We're either going to combine those additional duties to the city attorney, or I'm going to do it. This is and I keep hearing the concern about a firewall or some independence. The HR in no organization is independent from management. There is no firewall ever between HR and management. So if there's a perception, we need to correct that if and when we do. I don't care if it was a standalone HR. We'd have to make sure that an individual, when they go in and see an HR director, that HR director represents management. There is no firewall. He's not a father confessor. So, yeah, Rob.
Sorry, I keep trying to cut you off there. I wanted to pick up on that because the word independence has been used quite a bit today, or a version of it. And I'm not trying to talk the council into anything. You all get to vote your own desires and beliefs on this. But perception and reality sometimes are different. And I think this is one of those scenarios where legally it is different because there is no independence. Let's just go back to when Mr. Potter was the HR director. He was not independent from the mayor. No city employee is independent from the mayor in a strong mayor form of government. The mayor is effectively the government, and everybody is effectively a deputy officer of hers. So the reality when we had a exclusive HR director is that independence in reality did not exist. Now, again, people might have certain perceptions, but the perceptions in reality are different as to the HR director. Now, as I was saying earlier, if this comes to pass and this becomes a joint role with an in-house lawyer, that will actually be the scenario that creates additional independence compared to what has existed in the most recent past. The reason there will be an additional degree of independence is because, picking up on what Councilmember Carlson was pointing out about some of the slides, for an in-house attorney to be fired, the mayor and a majority of the council have to agree with it. So there would be more independence for the HR person in this combined scenario due to the fact that it would be a combined scenario with an in-house attorney. Whereas by contrast, the way we are right now, or the way we are a couple months ago with Andrew Potter being the HR director, that's actually a less independence scenario. Now, those are the realities. Again, people, including workforce, can have different perceptions. But then finally, also, as of the 58 number of employees, there also has to be a recollection that we have unionized workers and non-unionized workers. And those unionized workers do have somebody that's independent from the city. They have the shop steward isn't always independent. Sometimes that's a fellow worker or a former worker, but they have a union representative and the union itself, which are advocates for those employees. So that needs to be, I think, borne in mind too, that when we talk about our 58, they're not all similarly situated. But on the concept of independence, the reality would be that there would actually be an increase in independence for the person handling HR duties if this idea comes to pass, rather than in comparison to present reality or even the reality when Mr. Potter was the exclusive HR director. I hope that clarifies some of the realities versus the perceptions on it.
Did I answer your question, Clifford? Okay. Sherry, did you have anything to, I know you had your hand up. Silent, Sherry, you're muted.
Sometimes people would like to mute me. I've been jotting down some things. Cliff, you said that when Kevin Roy was here, there wasn't enough for a full-time attorney, right?
No, what I said was we kept them busy. That we certainly had enough to keep a full-time attorney busy when he was here.
Okay. So when you think back that many years when Kevin was here, and you look at how our world has changed and what is going on in it, I have no question that we don't need a full-time attorney. I mean, there are things that happen daily at City Hall that if we had an attorney in the other room, it would keep us out of trouble. Just like with the contract with the care stuff. We've done things and said things, and then we ask Rob about it later, and I see the look on his face. Oh, this is going to take a lot of work because we've done the wrong thing. The other thing that I was going to say is going through the past 8 months, I feel like I need an attorney, a personal attorney in my own pocket, just for my personal life, as to what I should be doing and what I shouldn't be doing. And when you think of the finances of a city, and us getting sued for something that we have done or said that we shouldn't have, that if we had had an attorney here, that we could have talked to him, because Rob is not always available. It could have kept us out of some trouble, could have kept us from a lot of the things that have happened this year. As far as the HR person, I know that the things that have happened with employees this year, I don't think any of them have come to us, and either I or Dawn have not pulled Rob in and said, what do we do? So whether we combine the two jobs or not, the city of Selah needs a full-time attorney. We've got all these codes that are outdated that we're scratching our heads trying to decipher what prior laws were out there that have changed that we don't know about, and we don't know about it until something hits us in the face. And then we're going back and trying to research it. So with just that part of it, I strongly urge the council to approve a full-time attorney.
Right. If I could also add to that, Sherry, I've heard, especially with Mr. Carlson, his concerns, but it's really delving into the management responsibilities of the city. He's putting himself in my shoes, in your shoes. what we understand the need here. We see it every day. Now, I would be more than happy if we could get a city attorney on payroll and the HR business stays in my lap. I'm happy with that. That's a compromise I'd be glad to make. But I'm sitting here before you telling you, I think the most appropriate place for those duties are with an attorney who is on staff. I think that individual could bring more to the plate for HR, for the employees that come to them, and have better and more rapid answers for the employees when they come in and deal with issues. And also be able to give myself and the mayor better advice as an HR manager and an attorney. We would get that combined advice in a rapid manner, in a concise manner. That's what I'm looking for. A more efficient process. And that's what I see in combining these two. But the most important thing, ladies and gentlemen, is getting a full-time attorney on staff. That is the most important thing. And I hear your concerns about firewalls, about confidentiality. I don't agree with those. But if I can get over your objection by saying, okay, fine, HR stays here, right here. I'll handle it as an additional duty. I'd be glad to do that if that's where you want to draw the line. I saw Clifford raise his hand.
This is again, I guess, perception rather than any substantive kind of change. But is it the name of the position that is the big issue? If we just called it a city attorney, full-time city attorney, and part of their responsibilities was to assist in HR responsibilities, is that the big obstacle that we're tripping over?
I think so, Clifford. But the main duties of this individual is going to be city attorney. That's the majority of the work that they'll do. As me, let's talk about the city administrator. I have a lot of duties every day, and I've added to those duties HR. I can accommodate those. It's not a significant workload. Some of it's distributed. Ads go to the executive assistant. Some paperwork goes over to the clerk treasurer, but most of it's in my lap, and it's manageable. So, and in consonance with what you were saying, yes, that would be more of an incidental, additional duty to the attorney, because it's not that much work in my estimation. Yeah, Rob.
I have a distinction that I hope will maybe clarify some of our discussions. Maybe it'll further confuse it. That's what us lawyers sometimes do. When we talk about HR, the HR role and the HR duties, I think it's a fair assessment to me to say that the concerns that are being raised here are probably about a component of those duties rather than all the duties, meaning a component of those duties, particularly when there's an employee complaint or something concerning the law or something of that nature, in contrast to maybe perhaps what is the bulk of the HR person's duties, things like advising employees about the new healthcare policy or beneficiary designation forms or wage and hour issues, or, as I said earlier, with hypotheticals, helping them get counseling or outside help for their own issues that are not necessarily workplace related. So if that is a valid distinction for us to focus on, kind of, I'll say, the more mundane day-to-day tasks in contrast with true complaints and investigations. On that complaint and investigation side, since I've been on board for about 14 months or so, to my knowledge, every complaint and every investigation that has occurred, as the mayor said, I was brought in and either handled it or still provided advice when someone else handled it. And I acknowledge I'm being a little bit cryptic there because sometimes you just can't talk about investigations. Some of this is percolating in the community, and most of you know about some of these things anyway. But I will tell you that I don't know that during my 14-month tenure so far, that Mr. Potter ever did an investigation or handled a complaint on his own. And then finally, another critical component, and I don't think anybody here is necessarily misunderstanding this, but just for the sake of completeness, is that the HR position, both historically, so for example, like when Mr. Potter had been here, and my understanding of this working idea, if it comes to pass, the HR position does not have true authority to hire, fire, discipline, change pay, change hours, those things. Rather, again, those are still decisions that the mayor, as the government, gets to make, and are delegated exclusively, to my understanding, to the city administrator in consultation with the mayor. But Mr. Potter never hired or fired or disciplined anybody, and I don't believe that that would be the role in this combined position either. So you're right, Councilmember Peterson. It might be a scenario where there's almost too much focus on the HR role in this discussion, but I think it might help us to clarify if we're thinking more of what I'm self-servingly labeling like the day-to-day mundane tasks versus the bigger issues of when there's a workplace complaint. And on that, in my 14 months, we haven't had 14 of them. We haven't anywhere close to 14 of them, which is a good thing. But to the extent I've ever spoken to any members of the staff, and as long as I'm around, my answer on, or my statement on workplace complaints is always going to be the same, which is if you think you have something to complain about it. Put it in writing, advance it, because that's what can actually get things solved and fixed if there's a problem. And the final point, I'm going to be cryptic again, but the mayor, administrator, and I had a meeting with a certain group of employees not too long ago, and they were not complaining at that time, but were seeking input and some guidance as to whether things they felt they've experienced were important enough to maybe complain about and how to go about doing it. And that's what all three of us said at that time. If you have anything to complain about, absolutely complain about it. I mean, we don't want people to complain about things that are not legitimate, but if there's anything that anybody feels that they want to advance a workplace complaint on, I will always be saying, do it, because that's what we want to have done. We don't want to have people not complaining and thus problems not getting fixed.
100% agree. Russell?
Let me clarify something I said earlier, and Rob, you made a distinction for me, and so I wanted to make sure that when I talk about independence, I don't talk about that protection, that firewall. I talk about when someone comes to talk to HR, are they talking to HR or are they talking to the attorney? Which hat is that person going to be wearing? And although you want to, as best you can, one would want to say today's the HR job, you're always going to have that legal hat on as well. I believe that if we did, as Mike mentioned, I know we won't, but if we did poll the city staff, they would all want an independent HR person. And I would say this, let me rephrase that, maybe not all. Majority would want an independent HR person. And this to me falls under the scenario of an attorney versus a paralegal. When you talk about the work that Mr. Potter did, he's not hiring or firing, but Mr. Case, you also don't do every piece of your work, right? You have paralegals that work for you. Is that correct? or no? Maybe
well,
not.
Yeah. My law firm, which I am one of the owners of, we certainly employ several staff members. Right. Frankly, throughout my career, I've never had a dedicated assistant. Theoretically, there's been periods of months where I've shared an assistant with someone else, but everybody in my building would tell you that really all my staff does for me personally, other than, hit and miss here and there, I might give them something small to do. They answer the phone the first time it rings. They follow up and whip me when I'm late on a deadline. But beyond that, I make my own photocopies. I do my own typing. I do my own scheduling. I do it all. My typos, that's on me. So I've always worked rather independently in that regard. I mean, I run the postage machine. I literally do it all at my office. There's other reasons for that. As a younger lawyer, which I used to be, sometimes when you're cramming something out to get it out late at night, you need to know how to work the postage machine rather than trying to call your staff back in at 10 p.m., which some lawyers have to do. So no, I really kind of do it all at my firm. Now, I don't want to downplay my staff. I guess I don't do the billing and accounts receivable. I don't do that, but that's all based upon my data that I input. Back to what you were saying earlier about, if somebody comes in to talk to this joint role position, who are they speaking to? Are they speaking to HR? Are they speaking to a lawyer? Well, they'd be speaking to both, literally. I get what you're, I think, driving at, but the lawyer in me would respond and say, objection, Your Honor, incomplete hypothetical, meaning kind of depends upon what they're coming in to talk about. If they're coming in to talk about, again, just like a personal issue, like I've got a problem or at home or at school with my kid, there's some things that assistance would be provided on. There's some things where the person in this role, if the person's doing their job correctly, would say, that's going to cross over into personal legal advice. I can't really give that to you. I can give you some broad strokes and tell you maybe a lawyer around the area that might be able to help you. But if it's somebody coming in to complain about a problem, they'd be speaking again to a joint person. But that's, again, probably not going to be a real distinction from what's historically happened. Even if some workers think it would be a distinction, in reality, it's not, because, again, any complaint that's been lodged or mentioned in the 14 months since I've been on board that came to Mr. Potter, who I liked and thought did a good job for us, I was immediately brought in on it. And so much so that I'm not aware of Mr. Potter having investigation experience prior to some things he had done during this 14-month period. And thus, even when there was some investigatory work that happened that I was not doing, I was still giving him guidance on how to do it. Now, I don't say that as a deficiency of his. I mean, he shouldn't have the same requisite background as a lawyer, be it myself or whomever else. And that's part of what we do is investigate. But to your question, what are they coming in to talk about is kind of why it makes it hard to answer that quandary of, well, who are they really speaking to? We know who they'd be speaking to. They'd be speaking to a joint role. But if they come in and say, look, I want to talk to you about something, can you promise me you keep it confidential? No competent HR person or lawyer should answer yes to that. They should say, well, it's going to depend. I mean, if you tell me you're stealing money or someone's stealing money, I can't keep that confidential. If you're telling me something personal, that, hey, I'm struggling to show up to work on time because I'm dealing with childhood issues of when I was abused or something, absolutely that's going to be kept confidential. And I can tell you, lawyers by law have the strongest confidentiality rules of anybody that's going to be in a professional scenario and are going to be most cognizant of it. So if this does come to pass, whoever's in this role, they will be protecting confidentiality to the extent it's possible. Certain things, once they're said, can't be kept confidential. And certain things by definition confidentiality will eventually go away, because if you're complaining about Superior John Blow, eventually that cat gets out of the bag during the investigation. But other things, if there's a desire and a real possibility of confidentiality, I would expect whoever's in this role, again, if it comes to pass, would actually be better at setting those expectations and fulfilling them, rather than, I don't want to pick on Mr. Potter again. I liked him and thought he did a good job for us. Was surprised when he left. But rather than somebody like himself that doesn't have true legal training and doesn't have the same legal confidentiality obligations by law imposed, as opposed to just kind of common sense and through the workplace. So it's a little bit of my stream of consciousness back into, I think, what your stream of consciousness there was, Councilmember Carlson. And again, I'm happy to keep having a dialogue, but they would be speaking to both. I mean, there's no way to say that a worker's coming in and, oh, I'm only speaking to the HR side of this person now. There's no way for somebody who legally, in the metaphor, is wearing two hats to say, I've only got one hat on right now. If the brain hears it, the brain knows it, the brain knows it. So yes, if somebody comes in and discloses something that causes legal concerns, they would be disclosing that to the lawyer. But frankly, I mean, they should be disclosing that irrespective of whether it's a lawyer or not, because if there's a legal concern, it needs to be disclosed. It needs to be at least brought up.
Yeah, and I think that's my biggest concern. We talked about the independence. We talked about the perception. I hear your point about whether they perceive it or not. It's not a real factual perception or factual scenario, but that's how they see it, and that's if they're not going to report it if they perceive a conflict. And I would say the same thing goes if the HR director position was being held by the city administrator as well. They're going to see that same perception, have that same perception, and they're going to have problems with reporting stuff. And I just think this is an avenue that we shouldn't go down. I think it's a bad idea, and I don't think we're going to have a staff who's going to want to have confidence in a combo position.
I'll go back to the history of the position one more time. It was an ad hoc administrative decision by me to carve these duties out for an individual who didn't have the experience in the job, but I thought he was capable of handling some of these things. Traditionally, HR is in the hands of the city administrator in this city. We have
That's how we did it. Doesn't mean that's how we should always do it.
We have 58 personnel. We don't need a full-time HR director who is qualified and has all the requisite certifications to be an HR director. Just not necessary. So we're not going to hire one. We're not going to hire one. So
I'll disagree with that, and I also disagree with the fact that we're going to save money, because we clearly were not comparing apples to apples in that because it was lacking information.
When you talk about money, we're talking about value here. What
you presented a savings, and that's not true.
I'm presenting value. That the value of having a city attorney in-house is more than just what you see on that balance sheet. The money that we could save by having an in-house attorney really could convert to tens of thousands of dollars a year. We haven't got all of our billings for the Owens case yet. This move would purely benefit the city. Hear me again. 3 city attorneys, either both contract and full-time, are saying you need a full-time attorney. Your city administrator is telling you we need a full-time attorney. Your mayor's saying it.
Russ, because I've never been a direct employee, I've never much focused on the value of benefits out here. I know they exist and I know some info about them. But when you're trying to get to more what you call an apples to apples comparison, are you saying that the benefits that would be paid to one person holding both roles versus the benefits that were paid, for example, historically to Mr. Potter, that in one role, so we still have one employee and one employee, that's a $51,000 difference?
I don't have the information what was given here about what was paid to Mr. Potter, but I'm guessing that the benefits for a position of an attorney is going to be a greater benefit because of the salary. So we weren't provided the information apples to apples. That's all I'm saying.
So Plan Z Teamsters is the same for single and married personnel. So the medical would be the same. It would be a wash. Vision and dental, it would be a wash. The only thing that we would be spending more on a city attorney for would be our contribution to their retirement PERS. So and at the end of the day, we didn't include the benefits for the previous HR director as well as the previous, we thought this was apples to apples and not apples to oranges, because we're not paying those kinds of benefits to the current contract attorney. So we kept it at base salary. Certainly you can see in your own spreadsheet the difference. Now if you're gonna compare apples to apples, you need to look at the benefits that went to the HR director also.
Yeah, and those weren't provided.
They're in your budget. If you look up
They
I'm
were
sorry,
in last year's budget,
they're
not
not,
this
they're in
year's budget.
last year's budget, excuse me. We'll have to pull those out for you. We will. Any other questions? I thought I saw a hand. Mike, I'm sorry.
Yeah, that was me. It was actually along those lines. I was just, because I know that Russ had made mention of a benefits package, and I didn't see it anywhere in the budget packet that we were given. So I was just curious as where those numbers came from.
The only difference in benefits would be in the contribution to retirement. It would be more significant for a higher salaried employee.
Okay. Thank you.
Any others? Okay, we're way behind. If we could pull up page 15. Okay. I'll go ahead and, excuse me, it's page 16, I'm sorry. Our revenues, we have some small reimbursement for our public defender, $4,500 this year. Any questions on that? Okay, we've talked a great deal about the pay for a city attorney. Some of these expenditures, like for instance, phone and cell, they're a wash because the previous HR individual had that, and now it's just moved to the city attorney. The $6,000 dues and subscriptions is for Westlaw, and Westlaw is a resource the attorney would need for legal research. Any questions on this page besides that?
Can you address professional services? The difference between 2019 and 2021?
Yes. We were looking, Dale, is that a mistake? We went from 68,000.
You're in line 41.
41?
Yes.
Well, yeah, just that instead of in 41, now it's up in 11. You know, there was
yeah,
six.
that's right.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're okay. We're looking at the difference between a contract attorney and not.
Thank you.
The 2,000 you'll see there is for, I believe, for stand-ins for our defender or our prosecutor. Any other questions? Okay, we moving on to Civic Center.
Don, I have a quick question.
Oh, I'm sorry, Clifford.
It seems to me that where does Rob's contract come out of now? And if this proposed budget has a full-time attorney on staff, shouldn't we see a 120,000
No,
drop someplace?
It's
Where-
distributed, Cliff. You got 50% out of general fund, 10% transit, 10% water, 10% sewer, ops, customer service, 10% sewer ops general, 5% solid waste, and 5% fire. So it'll be distributed on all those funds.
Okay.
Any other questions on that?
And that was the part of the professional services in each of those?
Yes.
Yes. No, you'll see on those others, there'll be carve outs for, yeah, it should be, Dale, is it professional service on those?
Yeah, the other funds will experience the same thing that the legal department did. Instead of 41, it'll be up under 11.
Right. Under general pay, because it's labor now. Not professional services.
But from the 2019 and 2020 budgets, it would be on the professional services, and now it's moving up to regular pay.
Line
Correct.
11, yes. Mhm.
That's it. We can move on.
Okay, moving on. Civic Center, is Mr. Shab around?
Indeed. Good afternoon, everybody.
Which page we on, Zach?
73.
Can you repeat that? What page, Zach?
73.
73.
73, yep. Again, I want to remind everybody that Teresa is also available for question if I can't answer them, but hopefully I can. So 73, Civic Center revenues. There's really the biggest glaring change is line 62.40, facility rentals. With COVID, we can't do all the early year crab feeds that we typically have, and we don't really know when we'll be able to start hosting events here. You know, we know that we're not going to really do any small meeting type things until the county's at least in phase 3. So that's one of the biggest things. But since you guys got your packets, last week, Harvest Church informed me that they have their own building now, that they will be pulling out of the Civic Center. So that's revenue that we won't get next year that was originally put into the budget. So that's roughly $17,490 that won't be coming into the Civic Center. Harvest typically paid $330 a Sunday. And then, you know, depending on the month, they paid roughly $1,300 a month, sometimes north of that, depending on the number of Sundays. So we'll have to adjust our revenue to account for that. I do have some ideas on how to recoup some of that money, but you know, $17,000 certainly is a hit that we're going to take for next year. Any questions about that? So if we turn to, that's all I really have for revenues, just because nothing has really changed aside from the facility rentals. On page 74, under Civic Center expenditures, you know, where there's not too many glaring differences. 31.00 operating supplies, we just cut that just because we're going to have less stuff going on here, so we don't really foresee having the necessity for the same amount budgeted as we had for 2020. Postage, line 42.01, same thing. We're not sending out brochures. We're not doing, you know, that sort of thing. So we have the necessity to have the postage budget that we have in the past. Otherwise, you know, repairs and maintenance, there's a little bit of a difference there, but you know, we're not using the facility as we typically do. So there's not the normal wear and tear of running large events from January to April, and then, you know, weddings and quinceañeras and that sort of thing the rest of the year. So that's really the main reason behind the difference from the 2020 budget ask and the 2021 budget ask. Any questions at all? Jackie?
Zach, one thing, could you mention to the council, we're going to have to buy a bunch of chairs because Harvest is
Yep. So Harvest, they provided all the chairs that we had, not all of them, 300 plastic stacking chairs here that they're going to take with them eventually. They've started to slowly move them out to accommodate for the numbers that they've had on Sundays. They're leaving some here for us to use when we do start up again with smaller sorts of things and jury selections. So we will have a handful of chairs here to be able to do those sorts of things, but we will have to purchase roughly 300 stacking plastic chairs to replace what Harvest had here for us.
Questions? I saw some hands. Jackie?
Zach, on the janitorial services,
yeah,
if the facility is not being used very often, why do we have the same amount in the budget?
We still have people for people in here, as well as the food bank, and we've got our doors open we've got our doors open as well for the Selah Transit drivers. So twice a week, the main hall is being used by the food bank. The bathrooms are being used by them and their volunteers. And then as well as People for People's here 5 days a week cooking meals. So they are also using the kitchen, the dining hall, and our restrooms. And then 5 days a week, we've got at least one door open for Selah Transit to come in and use our facilities as well. So really, I mean, aside from not having the large parties in here who clean up after themselves anyways, and our janitorial service comes through and does the spot cleaning and the restrooms, the work really hasn't changed much for them. We still are having facility usage 5 days a week on a regular basis.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Roger?
Not a question, Dale. Here's an example of a 54% benefit to wage. And that just seems a little bit out of line in comparison, but you go back to 2019 and it was 62%.
Well,
Hey, Roger, where are you seeing that 54%? Sorry.
54 for the projected budget and 62% for 2019.
yeah, and part of that, Roger, is that there's only 1.5 employees there. We're only doing the rec coordinator from July 1, assuming that the governor opens things up and we do fill the position at that time. And and that's at a, put it this way, the higher the salary the individual makes, the lower the percentages for fringe benefit costs, because insurance stays the same. So when you've got a position that only pays $42,000, or for half a year, well, it's 15%, but it's all in relation to the payroll costs, the fringe benefit cost is a percentage of payroll. So the lower the payroll side, it tends to escalate what the fringe benefit percentage is. That's where if you took only the top paid individuals and looked at what their fringe benefit factor is, their fringe benefit factor is a lot lower percentage than a lower paid person, because insurance is one of the biggest costs in personnel benefits, and it's exactly the same whether you're paid $100,000 a year or $40,000 a year. So that percentage is going to show higher.
Okay, and the next question I have is about the insurance on liability and property. Liability or property went down. Is that because we assessed the value of the Civic Center at a less amount than before, or?
We had recent valuations done through WCIA and Jamie Morford, and these are all up to date.
Yeah, and even then, Roger, yeah, it's a $300 decrease. Possibly it should have been a $80 increase. Offhand, I don't recall the exact. My feeling was if you look over at other property insurances, you will see like a 5% increase is what I just built in. But yeah, on this one, for whatever reason, it does show a $300 decrease. But offhand, I'm unable to explain why it went down 300.
These are all based on our valuations, Roger.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, moving on. page 75.
So page 75, I don't have a whole lot of knowledge on. So if Teresa maybe wants to jump in.
I think Dale can talk to that.
Dale.
Okay, what's the question? I was
Page
trying to look.
75, our Civic Center capital projects.
Sure. Well, the Civic Center Capital Project is just a reserve fund to help pay for future improvements at the Civic Center. And, you know, for this year and for next year, we're not asking for anything to be funded out of this fund, so it shows no expenditures. However, for the last several years, we have attempted to build it up. So we're making a $10,000 contribution out of Fund 118, the operating fund, into the reserve fund.
Any questions on that page? Great. Okay, moving on. Joe, is Mr. Peters going to be joining you on this, or?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm gonna let Jeff run with this, and I'll just back up whenever I need to.
What page we on, Jeff?
We're on page 32, is where we start with revenues for building permits. So is everybody there? Okay, so page 32, we start with revenues. Basically, this is our projected revenues is going to be $150,000 for building permit fees. Plan check internal, we're budgeting 0, so that's the money we take in, and we also pay out to our consultants to review the building plans that are submitted to the City of Selah, both City of Yakima and CWA Consulting. As under the external fees as the City of Yakima and CWA. Because Jeff Fortner is not a certified plans reviewer, that's why we're projecting 0 for that plan check fee internal. And then if there's some minor ones that he can do because they're stamped by an engineer, then it's just gravy on top. Any questions on that page?
Jackie?
Oh, Jackie, okay.
Thank you. Didn't we have a proposal to hire a new employee here at Public Works? And what was that employee again?
That's not under the planning and building. That's going to be the, I just saw it in the budget. It's the engineering technician. For that's to review all of the different city streets and sewer plans that the developers bring in. And Joe, if there's anything else I'm missing, please chime in.
No, that's fine. Yeah, Jackie, no, that'll come up tomorrow, and I'll discuss that. That's going to be through the water and sewer and street department.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
So moving on. Oh, wait, looks like I got a question from Russ.
First of all, Joe, I like your Northern Lights background. Thanks for entertaining us.
Okay.
Jeff, the question I have is on, you talked about Jeff Fortner not being able to review plans. Is that something on the horizon that he's studying for that? What's the plan there?
Yeah, he actually does have this. He actually has, 3 certifications now under his belt. One, which Roy did not have. And so he is currently studying for his mechanical certification for building inspector. Once he has that commercial and residential mechanical under his belt, then we're going to look at possibly going and having him study to be a plans examiner. And at that point in time, it may be a year or more out because the mechanical takes a while to get. But we would possibly look at his job description and what he's paid and have to adjust it, because somebody with those qualifications generally demands a little bit more. But it's down the road, but definitely a year or more.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, seeing no others, I'll continue to move on. So moving on to page 33, this is where we have the expenditures for the department. Actually, it starts out with code enforcement. We're running with pretty much the same numbers as we've had in last year and the year before. We did increase the uniform budget for Erin because she does do stormwater and she's outside in the elements and needs more equipment and such. And we did the same for the building inspector position. And this was in line with other public works employees' benefits as well. So any questions on page 33? All right.
Moving on.
Did I see one or hear one?
No.
Okay. Then moving on to page 34, this is more of the expenditures for the building codes department. No real huge changes there. As we move into revenues for planning, this is where the numbers get soft and fuzzy. So with regard to planning, it's very hard to project out how many different types of applications you're going to have and what your revenues are going to be. So generally speaking, we tend to project very low based upon what numbers we've had maybe the year prior and or the year before that. And so we're pretty much going off those exact same numbers that we had for last year. These numbers, the overall revenue from the planning department could go up. If you recall, some council members were here when we went and did a study session on some of our land use application fees, which would directly affect how much we bring in for these different types of land use applications. And so if I recall correctly, I think Dawn had indicated that sometime here in the new year, we would bring that back to you for your consideration. So that's not reflected in here at this time. Any questions on revenues from planning? Russ?
Jeff, curious about the recording fees that in 2018 existed, then 2019 didn't. And then we haven't spent anything for 2020. We have nothing for 2021. And also legal notices, the differences there.
Right. So the recording fees was broken up into a number of different categories. Before it was all kind of lumped in together, and whether it was a building or a planning recording fee, or if it was an outside utility agreement for public works, it was all just kind of lumped into the same bucket. And when we went through a year or so ago and started to kind of look at the BARS manual, which is what specifies what accounts the money has to go into, we found that we were supposed to separate out those different recording fees accordingly. So as you look at the different departments, there's under those different categories, the numbers will go up and down based upon that. But that's the 2018 is about when we did that separation. And we just didn't have any major recording fees. Legal notices, we really didn't have any large legal notices that went out in the planning department this year. They were mostly associated with other utility projects and SEPA environmental reviews, and so those were billed out to those specific accounts, either water, sewer, etc. Does that answer the questions?
Okay, next page.
Okay, I'll go ahead and move on to the next page. Expenditures under planning. The only major changes in this category is basically we We won't have any more charges for the Shorelines Master Program next year, as we have our consultant has completed all of their work, and we're just waiting to go through the final process for adoption with ecology. Same thing with the sub-area plan. I think that was in the on a revenue page earlier. We won't have any further money reserved or expended on that account. Greg Dorn has completed the draft, and I'm just waiting to kind of catch my breath to package that up, get that to the mayor and the city administrator for their review before it moves on to the adoption process on to council. We did go and cut out of the travel budget this year. And with COVID going on and everything, it was looked at that we don't need to have a travel budget for those different seminars and things. And so we'll possibly next year we'll have a request for that. And other than that, that's it. Any questions on this page or 37?
Okay, I don't see any hands.
Okay. And we don't have any requests for increases in salary in my department as far as I know.
I think Brandy's making an extra 35 every month.
Okay.
$35, that's about it. Above and beyond the 2%. No questions? Thank you, gentlemen. I'm sorry, Clifford.
Looks like Cliff.
I just wanted, since I asked the police and fire yesterday, do you have anything in your wish list that didn't make the budget?
The only thing that I did indicate in the early was a little bit more money for travel to go to a planning conference that I haven't got to go for the last 3 years. But both the mayor and the city administrator assured me that if COVID-19 lets up and I need to travel to do that, that they would provide that money out of other places in the budget. So I think I'm good.
Okay, thanks, Joe. Thanks, Jeff. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
You know, we're 40 minutes ahead of schedule. Are you wanting to move on anything? Tomorrow's going to be a big day.
Yeah, it is. I mean, if we can get parks knocked out, and if the council is okay with hanging on, we can. I'd look forward to getting parks out of the way if it's okay with everybody else. Right, can I see some hands if you're good? All right, let's do parks, Joe.
Can we take a short break first, though?
Yes, sir. How about we take 5?
Or is it going to be quick enough that we could?
No, that's fine. You can take a 5-minute break.
Take 5.
5 is good.
You know, we need to get some guidance from the council, the staff does, on how we're going to organize for next year, what priorities the council has. I understand we won't get those decisions tomorrow, but we should air them out, you know, where we're headed, and the council should decide whether they want to set up committees to explore one thing or another.
Well, one of the things that I was thinking of with that bond rates now are like record low, and it would be nice if we would have been able to be ready and float a bond now when they're like 1%.
Well, you know, you got USDA loans that are real low, and it's just, yeah, there's a lot of ways to skin the cat for, but that's an appetite for debt that the council needs to have a discussion on.
Right.
Certainly floating a bond, that's going to have to be passed by the general public. You know, so then there's also the other route is, you know, another utility tax. Those are all hard decisions, and we're not going to build anything without a loan or a bond.
Right. I mean, yeah. And I think that we're talking about a big enough outlay. I don't know what all of the potential funding sources might be. But when we're talking about that, I think it would probably be wise to run it in front of the voters anyway.
Yeah, what I think we ought to try tomorrow is just getting an understanding of what the priorities of the council are. Is it facilities? Or are we gonna look at our collection system, sewer collection, sewage treatment plant, water treatment plant? Where are your priorities? You know, we just need to hear that.
Yeah, well, I'd like to look into it more detail at some point. I mean, because we heard yesterday, it sounds like we have 2 years to make a decision on the police station, and you know, I'm sitting in the same room I did 40 years ago. And so, you know, there's a lot of those that we need to be looking at, but it looks like just about everybody's back. So,
Well, let's get deep into this, as deep as we can this afternoon, and maybe we can spend some time tomorrow talking about those things.
Let's remember though, on the police station, we don't really have that much time, because if we wait till the end, we still have to build it if we're going to build one or find another building.
Hold that thought for tomorrow.
Right.
Okay. So Joey, would you like to kick it off on page 42?
I'll do that. Okay, yeah, this is the general parks. The regular pay is based on the 2% for the union employees. We've got some, we negotiated earlier this spring what we call a CDL pay, and it's kind of a step in pay for employees that have commercial driver's license. And I think we got a $50 per person, if I remember right, for that. The rest of the salaries are about the same. Personal benefits stayed in there. Get uniforms. Yeah, $1,000, same as last year. Operational supplies. Now that's 31 is for all the parks. That is where I will put expenditures of items that are beneficial to all the parks and not for a separate parks. And then you go down and you look at 3102, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Those are for Wicks and Carlin, Playland. And so you'll see that there's individual amounts for those parks. Really didn't change much at all in there. The only thing I went down, and maybe I shouldn't have now, I don't know what it's doing, but it's kind of hanging there, is fuel. Seems to have gone down, and I don't know, I'm hearing it's going to stay kind of where it's at. So the personal services for all the other parks left the same. IT went down a couple $100. Really, it was about it. Cell phones went up a little higher. We got a few more employees that are charging to that. Travel I took down. Rentals and leases, those are again something that Dale picked up with our carrier. The on page, unless there's any questions, I'll move to page 43.
We got a question from Roger Bell.
Okay.
Yeah, Joe, what's the difference between uniform allowance and uniforms?
Uniform allowance. They also receive, I believe, $100 per person for boots. And like I say, the uniforms are
yeah, I was just curious why we break it into two separate categories.
Just try to keep track of everything. They're just, yeah, I don't know. Same
Okay.
Well, the reason is, Roger, in the Teamster bargaining agreement, the employees are to receive in their paycheck that pay for a uniform allowance. And since it's payroll, we have to show up above. And apparently that's not sufficient to cover all their costs for uniforms. So then Joe also budgets down below where he pays additional costs for uniform.
Okay. And the other question I have is, we've talked periodically over the last few years about doing something in the way of a memorial at Veterans Park. Is that anywhere on the horizon, or is it just on hold again now?
Okay, Roger, I just had a chat with Ted Pooler on that to get some design work pro bono. Everything we're going to do on that, we're going to try to get done pro bono. We're working on.
Thank you.
Yeah, Clifford?
Just a curiosity thing. What kind of supplies are different from park supplies in general versus ones for specific parks?
Well, like Carlin Park, we buy infield conditioner. All the sprinkler systems in each park. So I try to keep those sprinkler head replacements and controller repairs and whatnot separate to the parks. The fertilizers, I will break that out and put it in each park, just so I can try to see what it's costing us to maintain these parks individually. But the overall supplies, let's say I buy, I don't know, tires for a vehicle that's used in the Parks Department, then it goes into the general 3100.
Okay, Russell?
Joe, I'm curious about the increase in projected overtime pay, and also about the increase in costs for operating supplies at Carlin Park. Are we seeing or expecting more events that will bring in these higher numbers?
You know, this year they were projecting, I can't remember, 3, 4, 5 extra ball field tournaments. You know, obviously they didn't happen, but those were projected. And we assume that next year, if this COVID thing never gets lifted, that they'll probably be playing there all year long type of deal. I mean, I don't know.
Well, it's going to start in May, and we're hoping that we got some relief by mid-year, and we should have a more than normal, normal softball season. We're hoping.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean,
Oh, that makes sense. Thanks.
This year was supposed to be that way.
Thank you.
Okay, next page 43. Those are almost all those utilities. I broke the water, sewer, and gas and electric out, and just broke them out for each park to try to keep track of what it's costing us to operate those particular parks. The big one you probably see is we had $74,000 this year. That included the tennis courts, and that's why it's so high now. It's so low again. We got down to 8,000, and everything else is pretty much the same. So,
Any questions on this page? Well, with the council's permission, can we go to streets? Are we okay with that? So give us more time to talk tomorrow.
Page 63. Beginning as of reserve cash is a carryover from this year. The property taxes, I can't remember. I think Dale's got 9.2% in there. Property taxes goes to the street fund. There's some sales and use tax. Fuel tax gets in there. The transit is paying the street department $11,000 a year to maintain the bus shelters. Really was about it. We got and there was operating transfers in. It just picks up the slack of what those revenues do not bring in to order to cover to operate the street department. Now, remember, the 110 is just the maintenance and operation of the general streets. The Fund 111 is where we get into actual projects. So if there's no questions, we'll move to page 64. We have that broken down into different disciplines. 542.31 is the traveled way. That is the main streets maintenance for the street department. There's your personnel and your uniforms again in there. There's operating supplies, fuel. I left it the same again. Small tools is the same. Professional services, I bumped it up a little bit. Next year we've got to update our 6-year tip again, and I can't remember some additional stuff in there. But basically everything's the same. I mean, it really didn't change much. Go to page 65.
So,
yes.
Question, you have a new line item called disposal fees. What?
Disposal fee. Oh, okay, yeah. Disposal fees. Well, you probably haven't seen it, but I've got quite a pile down here by the old sludge drying beds that is of asphalt and concrete and brush and a lot of demolition debris. And I just would like to haul some of that off. And so I've got some money budgeted through all the departments to help pay for that. I mean, there is, I don't know what it is down there, 3,000 yards, 4,000 yards of material. We've just been dumping it down there for years. So it needs to get out of here.
We call it Mount Henny.
Yeah.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome.
Joe, can I ask about the repairs and maintenance on that one?
Okay.
Between different years, the difference in between 2018, 2019, and then budget.
Sure. What do you want to know?
Why the difference?
From the 19 and 18?
Yeah.
Well,
so I'm looking at 2019 versus.
It's the same thing. We want to do some additional patching in the streets, and we try to do a lot of it ourselves, but we just don't get to it all. And we will probably wind up contracting some of that stuff out.
But let me add to that. Mr. Henny is responding to the mayor and I asking for more street and sidewalk repairs and revamping those areas. So he's readjusted the budget to do so.
Yeah, and I'll get more into that into the 111th Street for actual projects. This stuff here is, like I say, is just general maintenance. Yeah. So that's all it is. Just trying to get additional potholes and allegations cut out and replaced. So yeah, I know we got good intentions. We just can't seem to get to it all. So if we go to page 65, you'll see the dollar amounts are the same as they were for this year. We didn't get any expenditures done on sidewalks. Really, we did some. Utilities, around 47. That is for the power for the street lights, and 15,000 is for traffic, and for the maintenance of the. No, that's not traffic control. That's just general maintenance on the. Where am I at here? I'm under sidewalks and operating supplies there. But it didn't change really much at all. In fact, I say I took the public utility services down. Just try to base it on what we spent. We spent $42,440 through August. You know, that's kind of hard to track because obviously the lights are on more during the winter than they are in the summer. So
yeah, for the month of October, you spent $4,051. So through October, you're at 58.5.
Oh, so
Should be good.
5, so we'll probably come right in there then. Any questions on that page? Okay, let's move on to page 66. There's the traffic control devices there. We spent, almost 1,500, budget 2,000. I bumped up to 2,200. We've had 3 street lights hit this year. One was over across from Daniel's restaurant, and another one was down there by Banner Bank, and the other one was across from Les Schwab's. And I don't know, whatever. Not one of those individuals had any insurance, so the city has paid for that, and then trying to recoup the cost. I don't know how successful that's been. In fact, one person. Pardon me?
Roger's got a question.
Oh, okay.
Joe, is any of that reimbursable from the state because it's actually a state highway?
No, everything within the curbs, pavement-wise, the state maintains. We maintain street lights, sidewalks, and storm sewer. For cities, I think under.
Okay, for some reason I thought crosswalks were part of theirs.
They do paint the crosswalks whenever I can shame them into doing it. And we did see some lane striping this year and some crosswalks stripings, but only the intersections that are controlled by a traffic light.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Snow and ice, right in there, it's the same, on salaries and whatnot. It went up a little bit. The operating supplies I left alone. Gravel's the same. Rock salt's in there. De-icers, actually I knocked it down 1,000. Fuel I left alone. Repairs and maintenance. I don't know. If you got a bad year and a lot of plowing, which we didn't have this first half of the winter, you can bang up some plows and tear up cutting edges pretty quickly. But this year so far, like I say, winter just didn't get us out there that much. Unless there's no questions, move to page 67. This is the maintenance administration portion of it. That's where my salary comes into it, part of Caprice's, part of Mr. Jones. The professional services, 41, I knocked it down 1,000. The construction inspection, I bumped it up 10,000. We are getting more proactive in doing our inspections and billing. So I anticipate that going up. Capital facilities plan, we were trying to get that done this year, and that is looking very good, but I'm hoping it'll be, because I knocked that way down because it should have been complete. The vehicle insurance is where Dale got those numbers from our carrier. Everything else is about the same. Repair and maintenance went up a little bit, but.
Russ?
Joe, can you go down talk about what you brought up about the construction inspection services, that we're being more proactive about inspecting and billing? What was going on before, and why is there a change?
We just, or maybe me, I'm just not as confident in the developers providing their own inspections and then certifying to us. Because it seems like we get these letters of substantial compliance or completion of projects, and then later we go out to install water meters and the water services aren't where they're marked to be. And so we're doing more of that, and then we're billing the developer, and that's been hit with some resistance, obviously, because it's going to cost them more. but
Cost them more to do it right, though. All right.
well, just that. Yeah, I don't know. They've got, how do they get that budgeted into their design and an inspection fee from a consultant? But, it's like right now, and it's kind of a pass through some of it this year for John Campbell. When we wrote the mitigated determination for the John Campbell School project, we put right in there that the city will inspect the water and sewer and the street repair, everything that's within the right of way. And we're going to build the school district for that. And so I've been using HLA for some of that services, and some of it's ourselves, but we've been billing them along for that.
Russ, we've been burned a few times, and we just don't want that to happen anymore, which is why we're doing more of our own inspections.
Yeah, I like it. Thank you.
I guess I'd chime in on that. Joe and I have talked about this numerous times with the different schools, and even some of the other developments that are going on. And it just makes sense to ensure that we're doing more of those inspections and making sure that they meet our standards, specs, and our construction standard document, which the council adopted, I want to say, last year. So.
And just to confirm, will this be across the board for all, or just those we feel like that have burned us?
No, we're not vindictive or selective. It'll be across the board.
Roger,
I just wanted to say the words. Thanks.
That's okay.
On the payroll, does that include the engineer in this spot then?
It's 1/3,
Payroll,
Roger.
engineer.
Yeah, it's 1/3, Roger, back on the detail sheets on page 111.
Right. So
for your new employee, Joe.
For the engineer tech.
Okay.
Well, I was going to get into some of that real quick. The next page 68 on capital outlays, we're showing, 17,000 travel way, 16,000 snow and ice equals 33,100. And if you look on the next page 69, you'll see a little sheet that I have together where we're wanting to buy 3 additional light bars. We're wanting to get I'm breaking a pressure washer out amongst the departments. We want to buy a new truck, so that's part of that. And a utility box, and a street sander, and a snowplow. So that's what that number will buy.
To be clear, that's page 69.
There's a table there, and that's for all the departments. But the one of the streets right there. Okay, then we're taking out 25,000 to go to the street fund from the 115, which is reserve fund, and the 31,000 for the equipment that I spoke of earlier is coming out of the Public Works Equipment Reserve Fund 171. Let's see, where is that? That's the next page. No. Well, first one I can find, if you go to page 94, just kind of keep your place there on the other page where we just left. There is where I really, for a couple of years now, I've been asking about hiring an engineering tech. And I'm showing that on that page at the salary of $57,000. And that'll come out 1/3 streets, 1/3 water, and 1/3 sewer. And I just need more help with some of the administrative tasks that I do to get these projects funded, go through the funding process and the grant applications. And I just want somebody to help me. That's all it is to it. I don't know what else to say, and so that's what I'm proposing.
So Mr. Haney presented this to the mayor and I. demonstrated the amount of work that would be required. It's going to be a full-time job. There's no doubt about it. And it's probably something we could have had for the last 3-4 years, but we're just getting to it now.
Yes, Russ.
When you talk about one of the responsibilities being grant, are we going to have opportunities for them to write grants for other departments as well? I see we're only pulling it out of 3 departments. Are we able to request, if there's something significant, that they participate in that?
We always help other departments when we can, you know? Yeah, we help the fire department out with things. We help the police department out with items, you know. I suppose if something came up and we could provide, I don't know, whatever, some data they need, we could certainly do that.
Yeah, I guess kind of the road I'm going down, I realize this isn't a grant person, that they would have other responsibilities, but I've felt for a while that we needed somebody hunting for grants, and so I think that's kind of
you
where
know
I'm
that
going.
I do hunt for grants, and I've been pretty good at getting grants, and then
You've done a great job, Joe.
No idea what's out there for the other departments. They need to come to us and say, hey, we need help with a grant because we found this opportunity. And if they do that, we'd be more than willing to help. But I'm not going to go out and fish for grants for other departments, because that's a whole other learning curve.
Yeah. You do a great job, Joe, on the finding those grants. I appreciate that. I just wanted to make sure, voice my opinion that I feel like there's maybe somebody else in the city who could possibly hunt for grants as well.
Thanks for the management advice. Appreciate it. Clifford.
Well, this sort of goes into what's on your wish list question that I had for everybody. But today's not the first time that we've heard you say we're trying to get to it, we just don't have time. Is the reason that we are falling behind, if that's what you want to call it, because of money, because of personnel? Is it administrative backlog, and would this new position help with that? Or do we need to look at more boots on the ground?
Well, I think that as far as money goes, we're doing fairly well on that. I mean, obviously we had gobs of money, we could do gobs of things, but I rely quite heavily on Mr. Jones, and frankly, I can see him, he's getting burned out on some stuff. I just keep stretching him out 100 different ways, and I just need somebody to share the load down here. That's why I need this, and so I can take some of that responsibilities off him, so he can get back onto trying to get these little projects done. Like I said, hiring these other contractors, or I might have this new guy do it. I mean, I don't know, but there's lots of stuff to do. We just can't seem to get to all of it. You know,
yeah, that's sort of my question, is what do we need? What do you need so that you would be able to get to them?
Well, I'm hoping that this person will provide that. You know, they're going to be another source for me to delegate things I want done to. Just plain and simple. And I can talk more later if you want to go over these other needs and stuff, like Don brought up treatment plant improvements and this and that. But
well, if I could shorten this conversation, the requirements that we're levying on the Public Works department is such that it's gonna just giving him more money to get a project done isn't enough. He's got a process and plan and put out the projects for bid, and they get stacked up on each other. He's got big projects, he's got medium projects, he's got small ones. Mr. Jones has to focus on the crews doing their work out on the field, but he's been gravitating away from that. And I think Joe's unhappy that Ty has had to do a lot of these other projects that were more administrative in nature. He wants to get Ty back to doing what he should be doing. And then having this new individual will handle some more of these analysis and planning that Joe needs to get these projects started and overseen.
Well, for example, a couple of things is that they're just not giving out any more water rights. We're not going to be go out and just because we need a new well, we can go out and drill one. So I've been talking with the the Taylor Ditch Company, and they're receptive. They're a little apprehensive, but they have, I don't know, they've got water rights. When they've got more water rights than they're currently using, but obviously the Taylor Ditch Company wants to not lose those water rights. But so I've talked to them about, and I told them I can't just lease them, I need to acquire them, these additional rights. And what I'm thinking is we'll put a pump station on South Rushmore Road, which is east of our office where the road makes a bend and goes towards the river. Put a pump station there where Taylor Ditch crosses and goes onto the Elks. And we pump down here to our lagoon, and we put in a package treatment plant. And if we can get, you know, a couple of acre feet a year from those guys, and we can get it during the summer months when they're running, if I can pump another, you know, 700,000-800,000 gallons a day out of that and treat that, then that'll supplement with what we need during the summer. That's when we need this water. It's when it's hot and everybody's irrigating and washing their cars and filling their pools back up. And so that's one project I'd like to work on, and I've been throwing that out for 6 months and I haven't gotten anywhere on it yet. And as far as the treatment plant goes, Department of Ecology, I think, is going on 4 years late with issuing us a new discharge permit for our treatment plant. So we've been waiting for this new discharge permit to come out so we know what our new requirements are. And then we need to do what we call a little study that says how to maintain adequate plant capacity. But until I know what the requirements are, I don't know how to put a plan together for that. So hopefully, you know, I put I think not a bad salary in there for an engineering tech, but get somebody in there. They're going to probably be, you know, into the that world for a few years, but they're not going to be totally skookum, but and that's fine because I plan on molding that person and giving that person guidance. But those are the kind of projects they could be working on, you know, and overseeing. Obviously, we'll have to go with a consultant for this, this water system improvements and also for the treatment plant. So those are my only two things. I mean, we're doing council approved and we're working on a USDA grant application right now for the fact you guys are going to hear it on the 8th of December. I'm asking them to authorize the mayor to sign that application. But with the USDA loan for that million, whatever it is, $2,900,000 to replace and to improve that sewer line from Fremont and Spires down 4th, down Natchez, the railroad, and then down to the plant. So that's going to be a big project. You know, that'll just, we just keep trying to do things. I don't know, I guess I'm just kind of a dummy and bring all this stuff on myself. But I think that's what you guys want me to do. So anyway, it's 4:30. That's the end of our time. We can pick up tomorrow afternoon on page 71, which is the 111 street improvements. And we can continue on then. unless you want to keep going.
I just
You're
want to,
probably tired, I would imagine, by now.
Clifford?
I just want to make sure that I heard that the answer was yes.
I don't remember what the question was again.
The question was, to paraphrase you, we keep giving Public Works all of this stuff to do, and you're trying to get to it and you don't. That although it may not answer all of the problems, but this new engineer tech position would be a giant step forward in keeping up.
Well, I'm going to say yes, you know, because nothing goes smooth anymore. It's just like our Well 7 project that had that contractor was supposed to start. I can't remember. It was start like the first of this month. And he came out and got started. And at the pre-construction conference, I says, because I already had this, I told you guys the big delay on my Taylor Ditch project because parts and supplies didn't come in. And he said, oh, got it all ordered. Yep, they guarantee it's going to be here. Well, he worked for like 5 days, and then he's asked for a 5-day suspension. And I got back to him. I says, really? Do you think that's it? He says, because he was supposed to start last Monday. Well, he didn't get his stuff again. And so he didn't start until Wednesday, and that was only the electrician. So I'm just saying, I get these, so it just, those delays take up time, you know? And we got things planned, we do this, we do that, and nothing goes smooth, you know?
But once a project's on the table and all ready to go, we have the people that can perform it. It's all of this preliminary stuff that, and of course contractors. I guess what I'm sort of getting around to is if you had another person working in Public Works
In the
that
administration,
went out and did the street maintenance or whatever, does that mean that we would contract less? Obviously, we be paid more. I think that you answered that the backlog ends up in the preliminary administration end rather than the physical doing the repair end.
well,
And so I think that's like I might say, I think the answer is yes, this engineer tech is a step in the right
I'm hoping
direction.
it's going to help. I really do, and I really believe it will help. It's just that, and I've told Don this several times or many times that, you know, I feel more like a worker bee instead of a director half the time around here. You know, I mean, because I've got to work on these stuff and get these things going. You know, it's like right now I've been trying to get a new right-of-way procedure going, and I've written stuff up, sent it to the state. They want me to change this, change that. And so now they sent it back to me Monday, and I haven't touched it since then. Well, so it just sits there. And we need to acquire right-of-way next year on South 3rd Street. I got some corner clips I need to get. I'm sorry I'm whining, but I'm just frustrated.
Actually, I was just driving down South 3rd Street today and was thinking, what kind of right of way do we have? And could we widen and improve that and take some of the load off of First somehow?
Yeah, I've got some plans that I can't even know what they're at 75%, 80%. And we're not going to widen it, but we are going to add curb gutter and sidewalks on both sides. So that'll get the kids, if they ever start walking to school and stuff again, out of the road. So that'll help. It'll be a clear, open, traveled way and not full of pedestrians. And there's going to be some growing pains because we're going to be eliminating parking along there. But I need to get corner clips at all the intersections because they're back when they were prepared all the right away. They're just, you know, right angles. And so obviously we've got bullards on those hydrants down there, but they get hit now and then. You know, sometimes I don't know where these trucks come from, but they get going. There's like the trucks that went in the Civic Center and tore out the the blue spruces several times out of the parking lot in there because they shouldn't be there, but they're there, and they hit these hydrants. And so anyway, I need to get some right-of-way clips, need to move hydrants back out of the way, and we're going to put curb gutter and sidewalk on that street.
Okay, if I could summarize this, the bottom line is the assistant engineer is going to make Joe and the Public Works Department more efficient. We'll get better throughput on projects. That doesn't mean he'll be running the projects. He'll help get them started. I think that's in summary, and just make the department more efficient. Joe, yeah, Mike.
Yeah, mine was actually, it wasn't to Joe, so you can finish up with him if you like, and then it was just a question.
Okay, yeah. What I was going to say to Joe, if we could start at Fund 111 tomorrow at 1:30 in the afternoon, please.
Sure. It's page
Okay, thank you.
71. We'll jump right on it and get going.
All right.
So my question was for the people that are going to be given the presentations for sewer and water tomorrow. Since we already know about the police department needs, because I know that we're going to be discussing the priorities tomorrow.
Yeah.
So could we have them prep a little bit as far as some of the things that are going to be needed in timelines for the sewage treatment plant or any of the wells?
Let me talk real quick, Don. So we have adopted November of 18 a general sewer plan, and in the general sewer plan it outlines projects for capacity related new areas and whatnot, and that's where that $2.3 million project I just told you about a minute ago, they were doing a USDA loan, that's where that came from. That was like that one project is going to eliminate so many bottlenecks. So that's that one. And the fact we're just wrapping up, and I'll be bringing to you another thing on the 8th, which is a water use efficiency policy and with a resolution. And that's part of our water system plan that I'm hoping we're going to be adopting in May of next year. But I got to get this water use efficiency policy put together and include that in a February submittal of a draft to the Department of Health. They've got, I think, up to 90 days to review it. They'll send it back. If they're happy, then I'll be asking you guys to adopt that. And in that's got a financial plan. That goes over the next, 10, 15 years of worth of what we are projecting out for rate increases, what we're showing for projects. And this document, like I say, it does that. Once they get this discharge permit from ecology and they tell us what our next whatever 10 years worth of requirements are, then we can sit there and say, okay, well, here's how we're going to maintain plant capacity. That's going to be another plan that needs to get put together. So, but I will have Mr. Eric Newmeyer here, who's the wastewater treatment plant operator, here with me tomorrow, and I'll have Mr. Jones here as well. And so if you guys, questions come up that they can help answer, they'll be here for that.
Okay, and what I can do is pull out my old estimates on our previous study that we did, and what I envision going on tomorrow is more of a general discussion, and perhaps talking about setting up some committees to study these things, rather than getting the specifics of, we really don't know how much these things are going to cost anymore. Even the estimate on rebuilding or building a justice center, those numbers are well on about 3 or 4 years old. So what I would be hoping we could do tomorrow is understand where maybe a little bit where the council wants to go. Do they want to go to a new justice center, or do they want to focus on public works issues, rebuilding or refurbishing or increasing our capacities in water and sewer? Just a general idea, because we don't have a lot of time. It was really never designed to do that. We're not prepared to get into much granularity on money, but what we can do is get the council organized to study this in committee to bring recommendations to the full council. That's what I'm thinking.
Okay, thank you.
I think what I'll do is this draft system plan. Here in a few weeks, I'll have it a little further along. I think what I'll do is put copies of that on thumb drives, and I'll give you guys all a thumb drive. Then you can stick it in your computers at home, and then at your leisure, you can thumb through it.
And I would be happy to go with our sewage treatment, our collection plan improvement, all, for sewer and water. I believe it's a 10-year plan, right, Joe?
Yes.
Yes, I'd be glad to go over it with individual council members. You want to come on in, we'll sit down and take a look at it and familiarize you with it. Okay, Madam Mayor, I think we've done enough for today.
Joe, do you feel some weight? Oh, wait.
You're muted now.
Do you feel some weight lifted off your shoulders, Joe?
Well, I didn't get a bunch of negative comments, so yes.
Okay, well, you have a good evening.
I will. Thank you.
Good night, everybody.
All right, bye-bye.
Good night, Sherry.